Okay, in this video, this one is for design students, maybe for younger designers as well. We're going to talk about using mood boards to develop a concept and some maybe tricks, tips, strategies for how to do that effectively so that you hopefully get somewhere new. I'm MVA Joshua. I am an art director and designer and partner in the MVA Studio, a graphic design company that does mostly everything for brands and institutions and artists that connect with culture or subculture, as the case may be. I'm gonna get slightly out of that glare. Oh, I thought I had it. There we go. Okay, so the other night I'm looking at a mood board from a student. We're working on a really quick turn project. It's not like a portfolio piece. It's just a thing that needs to happen. So we don't have time to come up with a kind of a big heady concept. We had a couple weeks till the end of the semester. We got to figure out what this thing looks like, and then we got to execute at the highest level that we're capable of. So she shows me this mood board. It's got this kind of cool 70s vibe. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Okay, cool. Show me what you did. So she starts to show me this book, and I'm looking at it, and it's like the book is really nice, but to me the book looks like Russian constructivism, which does not look like the 70s. It looks like the 1917s. As we come back to it, I'm like, can we look at the mood board again? And I was like, I'm not seeing it, and I kind of realized like there's some gestures that she's lightly picking up. Like there's a certain red that's in a bunch of the reference material, but it's the same red that would show up in Russian constructivism or Swiss typography. So it's not specific, and the way it's being used feels like it's specific to something else. And one of the things I realize is as we're looking at it, and I knew this already about just looking at mood boards in general, is when I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's awesome. I was personally, as a designer, responding to 2 or 3 things on the page that I was excited about. And then I didn't see that in the thing I was looking at, so I was confused. This is one of the problems with using mood boards is you pull a bunch of loose stuff that maybe is conceptually related. Like maybe the source material is the 1970s, but that's a 10-year period. And then when you show it to someone, a lot of the times when they're like, oh, this is awesome, they're talking about 2 pictures on this board of like 12 or 20 or whatever it is. And if they're creatives, chances are they're thinking about the things on the page that they would be excited to kind of break down what's happening and incorporate it into their take on the project. So in her case, what happened is, in reality, the mood board is coherent. It's like about the 70s. But if you look at the stuff and you look at the visual DNA of the stuff, it's actually kind of 2 concepts. There's like 3 images that fit one idea, 3 images that fit another, and then there's a smattering of basically loose change that individually they're cool, they don't fit in anywhere. So technically there's not a vibe because there's too many vibes. Let's say you're using a mood board outside of school. You're using it to present to a client and it's a super quick deadline. The goal of the mood board is to create clarity, not to create confusion. So if I show the mood board to someone and they're like, yeah, this is awesome, go ahead with this idea, but then where I go with it is a complete and total surprise to them because I was gravitating towards some aspect of it that spoke to me. Meanwhile, when they said that's awesome, they were talking about 1 or 2 things that they thought were rad. So the first thing I would say is like when you're using mood boards, do your normal research without a lot of editing. So if you're looking at stuff from the 70s, or you're looking at Swiss typography, or you're looking at whatever, stuff from last year, do you like your normal bit of research and don't analyze a lot at that point. Just kind of follow it, see where it goes. But once it's time to organize and analyze, you might have this stuff that you loosely pulled under the rubric of 1970s retro. But once you start putting it in a page, your job is to then look for shared DNA between pieces, shared visual DNA, and then split those apart into separate concepts. Because like just the example of the 70s, it's huge. Like, what do you mean by the 70s? You know what I mean? Do you mean Herb Lubel and stuff? Do you mean like pushpin graphic, hippie, trippy Milton Glaser stuff? Are you talking about Black Panther graphics? Like, what exactly do you mean by the 70s? There's so much stuff, and that's just like the stuff everybody knows about. You gotta siphon it down. Like, what's the visual DNA? Like, what are the shared attributes? And then you find like a nice, concise edit. And it doesn't all have to be one person, right? Like if we talk about 70s kind of hippie graphics, we talk about the pushpin graphic stuff, we might dip back into the 60s and pull some stuff out. We might be looking at some stuff from the 80s, whatever, but there's going to be like a certain approach to a few major elements that's going to inform what you do. So when you're using mood boards, depending on what you're trying to do, I'm assuming you're going for quick turn stuff that's maybe not high concept, that's vibey. You're just trying to create a visual environment. In that context, make sure that the mood boards really explicitly make a statement. Now, it doesn't mean you can't invent within that. So, for example, you could have a mood board that's got two distinct visual styles, because on one of them you're looking at the typography, and another one you're looking at the approach to layout, or you're looking at the image processing, or you're looking at the color. But again, it's not a smattering. I think the point of the mood board, if it works, is it's going to answer questions as you have them. You should be able to give the mood board to someone else and say, this is the stuff I'm looking at, this is why I'm thinking it should be in this style. If you give that mood board to someone else, another designer, and they can't figure out what to do with it, or they hone in on one thing that they like that doesn't look anything like everything else, then I would argue like that mood board fails in what it's supposed to accomplish. So think about that. Like, imagine the mood board as almost like a collage that forms a brand standards manual. That's part one. Part two is make sure, and again, this is super important on short-term projects, and I think it's really important if you're a student and you don't have room to explore because you have to generate results fast. Make sure that in addition to the big stylistic stuff, does the mood board answer questions about what you should be doing at a lower level? To go back to this example the other night, the mood board could answer some really big questions about, like in this book, the cover, divider pages, maybe the color palette. But one of the things it couldn't answer was, what do the pages look like? And this is the thing, like with students, that I think gets skipped over a lot, is we only see sort of like tactical book level typography heavy stuff if it's a super nerdy student that's into that kind of shit already, like me. Most people aren't really into that. So what happens is they pull a mood board for these big gestures, and then when they design outside of those big gestures, they fall back on what they know. And depending on where you're at, what you know is not that interesting or could potentially be really boring. So you might have your big stylistic one, and then you might have a sub-level, like if you're designing a book, of what do the pages look like? Are they dense or are they light? Are they consistent? Are they erratic? Like, if it's a picture book, do you have ideas about how to handle one picture versus many pictures, or type an image, or whatever that might be? Again, your goal is to be able to look at the stuff you've pulled and be able to answer questions about where to go. The caveat, again, in case you misinterpret here, the goal is not to be stealing other people's work. The goal is to be looking for DNA of visual styles so that you can break down what's happening and then bring it into the thing that you're doing. So picking one image, regardless of how dope it is not a mood board. That's just a thing. At that point, it looks like you're going to do a pastiche, which may or may not be interesting. And in this particular strategy, I mean this really concretely. Like, to me, this is about short-term projects and about making sure they're at the highest quality. So when you're a student and you pull those mood boards that answer those questions, like if you're designing a book or a website, how might you handle quotes? What are 5 ways of handling the quotes that like kind of define a look and feel? Images and captions, essays, blah, 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 page numbers even. The reason to do that is so that you don't have to fall back on what you know or are comfortable with. Because depending on where you're at, that's going to be super boring, or it's going to be super expected. Or like, let's say you've worked somewhere, like you worked at a newspaper. When you fall back on what you know, it's so middle of the road and vanilla and boring. And you have a skill set that can get you higher, but the problem is you don't have time. So you fall back on what you know. So the point of having a mood board of stuff at kind of every level is so that instead of relying on what you know, you're relying on what other people know. And that's that. I hope that makes sense. I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. I think this channel is going to be, from now on, kind of a combination of stuff for students and then stuff about running a design studio and working with clients and things of that sort. So if you got any questions or comments, please leave them. I'm freezing. The fingers are going to fall off. Thanks a lot for watching. All right. Making a new video today. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. It's freezing out. We got this nice low light, and I think I found a cool spot for it, so I'm kind of pumped on that.